All right, we are on chapters 12 and 13 of Wish. So I'm going to pull it up and then we'll get reading. All right, hold on one second. All right, chapter 12. Me and Howard waited and waited, but Wishbone never showed up. Gus had come outside a couple of times and sat with us, chewing on a toothpick and stroking a scrawny black cat curled up in his lap. Every now and then, Bertha would stick her head out the front door and call out, "Catch him yet?" We'd put our fingers to our lips and shush her, and she'd slap her hand over her mouth and go, "Oops, sorry." When the sun began to disappear behind the mountains and the lightning bugs twinkled out in the garden, Gus stood up in that slow way of his and said, "Want me to drive you home, Howard?" "No, sir," Howard said. "I'll walk." I wondered if Gus was thinking what I was, that it was liable to take him all night to get home with that up-down walk of his, but Gus just stretched and said, "Alrighty then," and ambled off toward the house. "See you," Howard said, and headed up the driveway toward the road. I sat there by the trap and looked over at Gus and Bertha's little house, nestled on the side of the mountain. How come Bertha hadn't told me Mama had been here? Had Mama liked it here? Had she picked pole beans out in the garden with Gus? Had she helped Bertha make bread and butter pickles? Had she sat on the porch at night gazing up at Pegasus? Had she slept in the room with those canning jars? Finally, I got up and went inside. I looked around the living room at Gus's old easy chair, the dusty table covered with magazines and coffee cups, the TV with a bowl of plastic fruit on top. Had Mama sat in that chair, propped her feet up on the table while she watched soap operas on that TV? I could hear Gus and Bertha out on the porch talking. Every now and then, Bertha's laughter danced through the screen door. Finally, I went out there and sat in the lawn chair next to them. Light from the kitchen sent a soft glow over the porch. I took a deep breath and said, "So, my mama came here one time, right?" The two of them looked at each other. Gus cleared his throat and shifted in his seat. Bertha reached over and put her hand on my arm. "Yes, she did," she said. "Oh, I watched one of the cats swatting a moth that was flitting around the porch." "When?" "A long time ago," Bertha said. "But when?" "When you were just a baby," she said. "So I came too?" From somewhere down in the woods, a bullfrog croaked, sending an echo across the mountains. Below us, crickets chirped in the tangled weeds under the porch. Bertha gave me a sad-eyed look. "No," she said, "you didn't come." "What about Jackie?" I said. "Did she come?" "No, Jackie didn't come either." "But where were me and Jackie?" I asked. "And Scrappy, what about him?" Bertha leaned over closer to me. She smelled like talcum powder. "Charlie," she said, "your mama came here and left you and Jackie and Scrappy behind, showed up on my doorstep in the middle of the night with a garbage bag full of clothes. Did she just come to visit?" I asked, but in my heart I knew the answer to that question. "No, Charlie," Bertha said. "She just up and left y'all without looking back." Bertha's voice suddenly had an edge to it, sharp and angry sounding. I would have never guessed Bertha could sound angry like that. "Oh," I said. Bertha continued, her voice getting sharper and angrier. When I asked her what in the world she was doing running off like that, she looked me right in the eye and said, "I'm tired of my old life. I'm starting a new one." A flash of heat lightning lit up the sky over the mountains, and there was a low rumble of thunder. "Then what happened?" I asked. Bertha let out a big sigh. Her new life didn't last too long. "How long?" "A couple of months." "But what happened?" I told her what I thought about her new life, and I reckon she didn't like it. She didn't want to hear what I thought about a mama who would up and leave her children behind. She stormed out of here like a freight train and hightailed it back to her old life, and I haven't seen her since. Another rumble of thunder echoed across the valley below us. "I tried to call, but she wouldn't even talk to me," Bertha said. "I sent you and Jackie cards and gifts, but she sent 'em right back. After a while, I gave up." She patted my knee. "I'm sorry to tell you these things, Charlie." I shrugged like it was no big deal, but my quivering chin must have given me away. Bertha knelt in front of me and took both my hands in hers and said, "Your mama loves you very much, Charlie, but sometimes she just loses her way." "Loses her way?" I'd be happy to draw her a map to show her the way back to being my mama again. I stared out into the dark woods below us and sent my laser thoughts zipping through the trees and over the creek and down into the streets of town wherever Wishbone was. I wanted him to know how much I needed him and what a great life he would have with me, and I didn't even care one bit if Mama had a hissy fit about him. I wonder if Wishbone will come get that food in the trap tonight, I said. He'd be a darn fool dog if he didn't, Gus said, and something tells me that dog is no fool, Butterbean. This time, when he called me Butterbean, instead of feeling like a baby, I felt a tiny smile tugging at the corners of my mouth, even though my insides were twisted up knowing my mama had just up and left me like that. Then I said goodnight and went back to my room. I sat by the window and watched the heat lightning. Where was Wishbone? Chasing somebody's chickens? Fighting with that little black dog down by those trailers? Or maybe he was out there in that trap this very minute eating tuna noodle casserole. I climbed into bed and thought about Mama. What was her new life supposed to be? Was she going to stay here in Colby forever? Was she going to be a school teacher or a librarian, or maybe open a beauty parlor down there on the Black Mountain Road? Was she going to find a new husband who didn't fight so much? Was she going to have new kids and give them cake with pink and purple flowers when they got home from school? But what was the use of thinking about that? She had gone back to her old life, and there she is, and here I am, with my family all broken and scattered every which way. Outside, the rain had started, slow and soft at first, and then faster and louder. The wind picked up and blew cool and damp through the screen. Suddenly, I sat up, my heart pounding. I hadn't made my wish today. My mind raced, thinking about my list of things to wish on. Too late for stars, no ladybugs in here, no four-leaf clovers or pennies or dandelions. And then I couldn't believe what happened next. From far off in the trees outside the window came the song of a mockingbird. Hearing a bird sing in the rain is on my list of things to make a wish on. So I closed my eyes and made my wish. Chapter 13. And so my life in Colby, North Carolina, marched on, rumbling down the mountain on the school bus beside Howard, ignoring those hillbilly kids who wouldn't give me the time of day, playing Bible detective at church, waiting for Wishbone to eat hot dogs from the pie tin, gazing up at the stars on the porch with Gus and Bertha, making my wish every day. Jackie called every once in a while to tell me about her happy life back in Raleigh. She was going to the prom with that boy Arlo. She and Carol Lee might work at the Waffle House this summer. She got a fake tattoo of a butterfly on her ankle. I told her about Wishbone and how he was going to be mine, and she asked me if I really thought that was a good idea. I told her yes, it was a very good idea. I told her yes, it was a very good idea, and that was that. I'd seen Wishbone 3 more times, sniffing at the trash in the parking lot of the Dairy Freeze, trotting along Highway 14 in the rain, eating something out of a paper bag under a picnic table beside Brushy Creek. Twice I'd found the pie tin in the trap empty, but I hadn't seen him anywhere nearby. Luckily, there were only 2 more weeks of school left, and then I would have my days free to spend more time by the trap. But I was beginning to worry that Wishbone was never going to be mine. Maybe I was wasting my time even thinking about it. I heard Wishbone barking last night, Howard said one day while we sat on the old couch on his front porch eating popsicles. How do you know it was him? I asked, watching Cotton jumping onto a milk crate in the yard with orange popsicle juice running down his chin and onto his bare stomach. I just know, Howard said. We're never going to catch him, I said. Gus was right. He likes being a stray. Don't be a quitter, Howard said. I'm not a quitter. Yes, you are. I stamped my foot. I am not. Howard licked melted popsicle off the side of his hand and said, Pineapple. I flopped back against the sofa and hurled my popsicle stick out into the yard. That pineapple plan of his was starting to get on my nerves. Oh, good gravy, Charlie, he said. Don't be a baby. I'm not a baby, I hollered. Howard shrugged. You sure are acting like one, he said. Just then, Mrs. Odom came out on the porch, wiping her hands on a dish towel, but my temper had a hold on me, and I could not shake it. I also could not stop myself from yelling, Well, at least I'm not a squirrel-eating hillbilly like you. Then I stomped down the steps, marched across the yard, climbed on Lenny's bike, and raced up the road toward Gus and Bertha's. When I got there, I dropped the bike in the yard and headed for the house. But as I reached the front door, I heard something over by the trap. I turned to look and couldn't believe my eyes. Wishbone was in there gobbling up meatloaf and french fries. I didn't waste one more second. I raced across the yard and slammed the door of the trap shut with a bang. Wishbone let out a yelp and jumped clear up off the ground. Then he slinked back into the corner and hung his head, dragging his ears onto the ground. He looked so scared it like to broke my heart. "Hey, Wishbone," I whispered. He pushed against the chicken wire so hard I was afraid he might bust right through it. "I got more meatloaf," I said. He cocked his head. "Wait right here," I said. "I'll be back." I closed the latch on the door of the trap and hurried inside the house, calling for Bertha. We nearly collided when I darted into the kitchen. She clutched her heart and said, "Charlie Lordy, you scared the dickens out of me." "I got him," I hollered. "I got Wishbone." I yanked the refrigerator door open and took out a foil-wrapped slice of meatloaf and ran back out to the yard. Bertha ran after me, calling, "I knew it! I knew my meatloaf would do the trick." When we got to the trap, Wishbone was digging at the ground beside the wire like he was trying to dig a hole clear through to China. Dirt and pebbles flew out behind him. When he saw us, he stopped and backed up into the far corner of the trap again. I unwrapped the foil. "I brought you some more meatloaf," I said. He let out a little whine, soft and pitiful. I could hear Bertha telling me to be careful and don't stick my fingers through the chicken wire and stuff like that. But I kept my eyes on Wishbone and told him not to be scared. Then I stuck a piece of meatloaf through the wire near him and waited. His nose twitched as the meatloaf smell drifted his way. He stood up and sniffed some more. "Come on, Wishbone," I said. "It's for you." He took one step forward, keeping his eyes on the meatloaf. He took another step, then another, till he was right at my hand. Then he snatched the meatloaf, swallowed it in one gulp, and wagged his tail. Wag, wag, wag. 3 tiny wags like he was thanking me. I turned to Bertha. "Did you see that?" I asked. Bertha nodded. "I sure did. I confess I thought you were going to lose a finger or two." She reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out 2 saltine crackers. "Give him these," she said. I gave Wishbone the crackers, and after he gobbled them up, he looked at me and wagged his tail again. Then Bertha helped me look for the collar Gus made from an old leather belt of his. We got rope from the garden shed and tied it to the collar. I ran back inside and got more food. Some cereal, a piece of raisin bread, and a couple of slices of bologna. Then I raced back out to the trap with Bertha, not far behind, calling, "Wait for me!" And that is the end of chapter 13. There'll be questions on Shobi.